Hello and welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be talking about some of the more famous haunted locations in Norfolk, or supposedly haunted. I've not really been to any myself, so I can't say yes or no, but they're long-standing stories or tales, hundreds of years. And today, for a backdrop, we're looking at the cherry shrimp again, a mixed colony. We might get some fishies showing up. There might be some celestial pearl danios, a pygmy cory, or if you're really lucky, some clown plecos. So there's no particular order to this. I'm just going to go through these and I'll judge how many to go through by how long the video is getting. So bear with me. If you've not been here before, don't forget to subscribe. Memberships are already always speaking English sharp, that might help. Memberships are open as well, and don't forget, like and comment if you've got anything you'd like to tell me. If you've got any spooky Norfolk ghost stories, then let me know in the comments as well. Anyway, let's make a start, shall we? We'll start with Blickling Hall, probably one of the more famous, pretty much known generally countrywide if not worldwide. It was Blickling mentioned in the Domesday Book. The present hall only goes back to the 17th century, but it's best known as the birthplace of Anne Boleyn, Henry VIII's second wife, after she failed to give Henry the son he wanted. He kind of did what Henry VIII did and decided he needed a new wife, charged her with high treason and had her hung. Now the story goes, annually, every year, at night, May the 19th, on the anniversary of her execution, apparently Anne Boleyn's ghost rides up to the house, dressed all in white, on a coach drawn by a headless horseman with her own head in her lap. So she was hung, not beheaded. I don't quite see that one. But as soon as the coach arrives in front of the house, it just poof, vanishes. There's also the ghost of Sir Thomas Boleyn, Anne's father, who haunts the area. Legend has it that he had been cursed for failing to do something to prevent two of his children, Anne and George, from being executed by Henry. Every year his ghost has to try to cross 12 bridges before cockcrow, which takes him from Blickling to Aylsham Borough, Buxton, Coltishall, Mayton, Oxnead and Wroxham. I'm guessing there's been a sight as a ghost crossing bridges, and they've all been put together. But the Boleyn family members are not the only ghostly residents of Blickling Hall. There's Sir John Falstaff, 15th century knight, who is the inspiration for Shakespeare's Falstaff, who's been seen wearing a full suit of armour at Blickley, usually around the anniversary of Anne Boleyn's death. Also Sir Henry Hobart, who died of his wounds in the house following a duel in 1698, has been heard groaning in the west turret bedroom on the anniversary of his death. And it's also a very pretty place to visit, as are quite a lot of these on this list. If there's a hall in it, chances are it'd be a nice place to visit, and it's probably a National Trust place, so if you remember, you can get in free. Now we move to number 2, which is a very famous one, which is Rainham Hall. And Sir Roger Townshend started building Rainham in 1619 near Fakenham, and it's been the seat of the Townshend family ever since. More famous residents were Charles Townshend, the second Viscount, 1674-1738, who is the leader of the House of Lords, and the mysterious Brown Lady. According to legend, the woman in the brown dress is Lady Dorothy Walpole, sister of Britain's first Prime Minister Robert Walpole even, of Houghton Hall. She died at Rainham Hall, officially of smallpox. Many think something else might just have happened. Dorothy married Charles after his first wife died. Marriage had its problems and Charles was not a good husband. Took her children away and had his mother take care of them. And Dorothy was confined to her rooms at Rainham Hall and died shortly after at the age of 40. So, yeah, some say she may have been starved to death, fell or was pushed down the grand staircase. Whatever the truth is behind her death, she got some unfinished business, as the ghost was soon seen by servants, family and visitors. And quite famously, there is the photograph of her, the Brown Lady, which is in pretty much any ghost book. It's taken in the 1930s by Captain Provan for Country Life magazine, and it was actually in the magazine. And that picture has had a lot of scrutiny over the years and no one could find any fault with it. George IV also stayed in the state bedroom at Rainham Hall when he was Prince Regent, and he complained about being disturbed by a lady dressed in brown with dishevelled hair and a pale face. Sorry, I can't read today for some reason. After that he would not set foot in the house again as he was sure it was haunted. Now we go. I say Rainham Hall is generally not open to the public, but the present Lord and Lady open the house every year for recitals in the Marble Hall and several open days where you can take a tour. And third, we have Binham Priory, Binham if you're non-local. And Binham has been a place of continuous worship for over 800 years. The priory was closed as part of the dissolution of the monasteries, but a section was preserved and turned into a parish church which is still used today. Of course, also a graveyard. But the ghosts of Binham Priory are thought to come from the old underground tunnels. At night, a black hooded monk has been seen emerging from a tunnel that connects the priory to the shrine at Walsingham, 3 miles away. There have also been sightings by the entrance to the priory and inside the church. Other times, around about midnight, the traditional hour as it were. Not that these things really make a difference, but people seem to be more aware when it's the middle of the night and quiet. But people have reported hearing mysterious music coming from the tunnels under the priory, believed to be Jimmy Griggs, a local fiddler, who was trapped in the tunnel with his dog when a storm caused the tunnel to collapse, which wouldn't be a pleasant way to go. And Binham Church is also open, as most churches are these days. And next up at number 4, again no particular order, we have Castle Rising. Now, if you ever looked at somewhere and thought that's haunted, Castle Rising is the place. Now, William Daubeny II built Castle Rising in the 12th century as a fortress and hunting lodge, but the most famous resident was Queen Isabella, the she-wolf of France. She lived there between 1330 and 1358 and still apparently haunts the upper rooms. When Queen Isabella was living at Castle Rising, she was said to have suffered bouts of madness, probably dementia or such, and since she died, some have reported seeing her transform into a wolf. Righto. Several visitors have been scared by the sound of hysterical cackling coming from the top floor of the ruins. Residents in the nearby village have also been bothered by ghostly screams and laughter heard in the early hours of the morning. Some believe Isabella was responsible for her husband Edward II's death. After he died, Isabella and her lover Roger Mortimer, I had a maths teacher named that, ruled for 4 years as regents for her son Edward III. She fell from power when Mortimer was tried for treason and executed. She spent most of her last troubled years in the upper rooms of Castle Rising, but then died in her castle at Hertford in 1358 and buried in the monastery of Greyfriars by Newgate in London. After the dissolution of the monasteries, it became Christ Church Greyfriars, a parish church which is largely largely destroyed during the Second World War, and is now a country garden. Oi, your granddad bombed our church. Sorry, England joke. But Castle Rising is open to visitors during the day. It's an English heritage site, so if you're a member you can visit free, otherwise you have to pay. Don't think it's too much though. And the Sheringham coast. Now, Norfolk has a lot of coastline, and there are lots of stories around and about, including various disappeared villages and shipwrecks and all sorts. But Sheringham used to be a small fishing village, but it's grown massively since the arrival of the railroad and the roads and everything else. Now, off the coast, you can sometimes hear a ghostly noise which is believed to be doomed mariners, now called the Yow Yows, who drowned in a storm after no one tried to save them. Typical Norfolk pronunciation, the Yow Yows, because they probably go yow yow, so that's what they get called. Yeah, typical Norfolk sense of humour, really. Even today, on days when the sea is calm, fishermen report hearing cries for help. And like in the past, they do head to the spot where the voice is heard to try to help. When they get closer, the sound moves to another area of the sea, and when they head there, the same thing happens. Obviously, Sheringham is free to visit, being a town. And we have Waybourne Beach. When the moon is full, a persistent whistling sound can be heard. Some people have reported that once the whistling stopped, they saw the vague outline of a man, believed to be the ghost of smuggler John Smythe, or Smith, depending on how you read it. According to legend, one night when the moon was full, Smythe and his crew came to Waybourne to smuggle. Smythe left his crew to meet up with his daughter of the teeth in. Hell, if I could read my handwriting here, wouldn't it? Smythe left his crew to meet up with the daughter of the local inn's landlord and said he would be back at a certain time. Yeah, we know what he was up to. But while he was away, the customs men got word of the smugglers and headed to Waybourne to catch them. Smythe's crew found out about the customs men and they knew they needed to leave, so they did. When Smythe didn't return on time, they assumed he'd been captured, so began to row back to the ship. Customs men didn't know the boat had left, so they hid in the sand dunes and waited for the smugglers. Smythe, whose rendezvous with the young lady lasted a bit longer than expected, good man, returned to the beach and saw the rowboat headed out in the distance. He started to whistle to get the crew's attention. Unfortunately, the whistle caught the attention of the customs men and they came after him. He decided to swim rather than risk capture. Unfortunately, he didn't know how to swim and the tide was coming in fast. Also, the customs men couldn't swim either, so they didn't go after him. Obviously, he drowned. Body was never recovered, but apparently you can still hear him whistling, and if you're lucky, see him. I think the whistling is probably just the wind in the sand or the dunes, something like that. But hey, these stories all come from somewhere. And there's usually a kernel of truth in them. Oh, how are we doing on time? It doesn't say. Oh well, we'll carry on going for a bit then. On to Felbrig Hall next. It's a 17th century English country house with Jacobean or Jacobean even architecture and Georgian interior. Mainly known for the ghost of William Wyndham III, and he's been seen in the library when a particular combination of books is placed on the table. Don't worry, he's just catching up apparently on reading he didn't do while he was alive. He was the first son of William Wyndham II and Sarah Lukin, known as Fighting Wyndham, after being sent home from Eton in 1766 for his role in a school rebellion against an unpopular new headmaster. He also served as Member of Parliament and was appointed Secretary for War and the Colonies back in 1806. When a fire broke out at a friend's library in London, William couldn't bear to see the books burn and risked his life to rescue them. He was badly injured by the flames, unfortunately dying a few weeks later, so it's not a surprise that he would haunt the library of his own home. Again, a National Trust property. So, if you remember, free. If you're not, pay. But yes, these places are all worth a look around and explore. Next we come on to Stiffkey Marshes, although in the Norfolk it's pronounced Stookie. Yeah, just go with it. Norfolk pronunciations are weird. I've been here 30 odd years, I still don't get it right. But at the northern end of the village of Stookie, there are salt marshes which get flooded daily by the tide, which means it's really rich in wildlife, famous for its Stookie blues, which are cockles, and they get their blue hue from the mud they live in. If you can find the cockles, they are fully edible, and I wouldn't say no to a pint of cockles. One young girl called Nancy was cockling when the tide started turning and a thick fog rolled in. Villagers searched for her. Despite hearing her cries, they couldn't find her. Next day they found her body, and she was buried in the local churchyard, but apparently still on foggy nights. There have been reports of screams and her ghost roaming the salt marshes. And there's probably more than one person that's died out there, to be honest. Not making light of the subject, but yeah. And then we move on to East Somerton and St Mary's Church. There are a lot of St Mary's churches in Norfolk. I think Norfolk's got the most ruined churches in the whole of the country. But anyway, the picturesque ruins of the medieval church of St Mary's in East Somerton are now hidden in the woods. So summertime you're going to do really well to find it. Wintertime you'll do better. You can see it. Fell into disuse in the 17th century after the parish was swallowed up into West Somerton. These days only the 13th century tower and the 15th century nave still stand. The doorway is just an arch and the windows no longer have any glass. You can look straight up and see the sky. There's no roof at all, and nature has reclaimed the spot with vines wrapping around the church and a tree in the centre known as the Witch's Leg. Now this thin oak tree is said to be the work of a local witch who was buried alive in the church during the height of the witch trials. And apparently she cast a spell so that her wooden leg would sprout a tree and destroy the church above. If anyone walked around the tree 3 times, the spirit would be released. And apparently ghostly monks haunt the church to make sure that no one releases the witch's spirit. And it's easiest to find and best to visit if you follow the sign past this circular walk from nearby Winterton-on-Sea, and if you're lucky you can see some seals when you're done. And finally for today, because this has been a bit of a waffle and a ramble, I'm not even entirely sure what I've been talking about, I've just been reading some notes. We're going on to somewhere that I aim to visit fairly soon, and that is Thetford Priory. So here we go. Founded in the early 12th century, the Priory of Our Lady of Thetford is one of the largest and most important monasteries in medieval East Anglia, the burial place for Earls and Dukes of Norfolk, one of the last monasteries to be suppressed in 1540. Just before the dissolution though, some tombs were removed, and in more recent years there have been sightings of ghostly monks around the ruins, perhaps a connection. The TV programme Ghost Hunters even visited in, I think it was the first episode of their 2nd season. In 1937 witnesses reported monks chanting and singing in Latin. Then in 1987 a group of friends watched through an archway as a monk came down some stairs. When they went closer, the monk and the stairs had disappeared. In 1992 the teenagers heard some keys clinking and saw an apparition of a monk run straight past them. and Thetford Priory is free to visit, hence why I'll be visiting. So there we go. 10 local haunted places. If you're over in Norfolk, check some of them out. But anyway, if you made it this far, thank you very much. Most appreciated. And as usual, as us YouTubers have to say, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share. If you've been to any of these places, or you've got your own spooky stories to tell, or perhaps something you'd like me to look into and maybe do a video on, let me know down below in the comments. But anyway, thank you very much again for watching. Have a good day. Enjoy your hobbies. Try not to be too scared. Have fun. Peace out. Rock on. Bye bye.